Hi, my name is Denny Hook. I have been listening to the universe, and for that reason I've been on a journey that I am compelled, called, and driven to share with everyone, because it gives us a different view of the universe than most of us experience. And I think it is one that will bring hope and joy to you. So I will start where I start, which is in 2001, when I was watching a video by Bill Moyers called Earth on the Edge. And in this video, he has 3 scientists who are working in the field, spread out all over the world, from Mongolia to Brazil to the United States. And their position is to study the ecosystems where they are. And they do that very thoroughly. But by the end of the show, he asks each one of these persons who are experts in their field in water, soil, and land, and air, about how long do we have before the ecosystems start to fail. Well, each one of them came up with a number, 30. 30 years before our ecosystems fail and life as we know it ends. That night, I could not sleep. I was absolutely terrified. I could not believe that that was even possible, that life as we know it could end that soon. And then I thought, well, maybe they're wrong. Maybe we have 100 years. And then I thought, that's not too long either. So we have to really take things seriously. So the next day, I wanted to contact Bill Moyers and find out how I could make a difference and what I could do. Well, if you've ever tried to contact someone that famous, for me it was impossible. I never could, and I was so frustrated. So I decided that I needed to do something. So I was a United Methodist minister at the time, and I emailed every minister in the conference and all laity that I knew that had an interest in the environment. And I told them to come to Oklahoma City. I didn't live there, but that's where I wanted to call the meeting to, and to only come if they were very, very passionate about saving the earth, and if they were willing to work. That it wasn't going to be a debate session, it was going to be a work session. Well, I set a date and showed up, and there were 35 or 40 people. And we began something called the Environmental Coalition within our conference and our denomination. And we had quite an impact. I was blessed with all the people that showed up that had that kind of passion and that kind of interest. And we made quite a difference in raising consciousness about the environment. But we did not do it by telling people how dire we thought the situation was. We did it by telling people what they could do. You know, we brought up the fact that they could change their lighting to LED lighting. And one dormitory at Oklahoma City University saved over $200,000 when they changed their lighting. We talked about going to wind power when it was possible, and passed the resolution in our conference that every Methodist church, every Methodist parsonage, every Methodist family, if possible, would go to wind power when it was offered. And we put that as a vote before the conference. Well, the only pushback we got was, not surprisingly, from an energy company who felt like we were messing in their business, and we were going to be competition or something. But the people of Oklahoma responded, and we won hands down, like 99-1, which really encouraged me that many people in Oklahoma cared that much about the environment. Well, that lasted about 15 years. And then I had another environmental adventure. And before I go on with it, I want to tell you this, that this isn't just about environmental incidents. And I don't want you to lose interest because you think here's another wild-haired environmentalist just wanting to talk about it. Well, it takes a different turn after this second event that I will tell you about. Well, I retired, and I went to retire in Texas. And I was contacted by an environmental group near my hometown there, and they proposed that we protest the Keystone Pipeline. That was the pipeline that was to bring the oil created from shale out of Canada to the coast. And I'm a firm believer that fossil fuels have had their day. I'm not against oil companies, I'm not against energy companies, but I am against fossil fuel because I'm very clear that our world will not survive unless we get away from it. I know the problem about jobs and all that, but it's far worse consequences if we do not rid ourselves of fossil fuels. So I was loaded to go. And so I went and was in East Texas, and this whole event was run by people in their 20s, early 20s. There were about 10 to 12 of them, and I was amazed. These young people were putting their lives on hold to try and make a difference, to try and stop a pipeline they believe was going to not be helpful for the earth and for their future. And so we did it. I won't go into a lot of detail about what happened, except we were able to stop the pipeline for one day. All of us were arrested. I was the first. And I got bailed out of jail by my 85-year-old friend, who I had to call because my wife was shopping. And so I called him and said, I need you to bail me out of jail. And he said, let me talk to the judge. And so he did, and I was bailed out of jail. But it was quite an event. And I was so inspired by those young people. I felt like they were voices from the universe that were speaking to me about their future and about the future of the earth. Well, then I retired again, went back home and decided to study or to look into more detail about this earth I wanted to save and that needed saving. And so I wanted to familiarize myself with what it was about. And so I began to read a lot. One of the books I read was Tales from the Underground, and it talked about a bacteria called Rhizobium. I'm going to say it, Rhizobium. And Rhizobium was a little bacteria that does wonders. It is lured to the roots of a plant by pheromones. And then it enters the plant through the roots, and then the plant automatically places a molecule around the Rhizobium because it's allergic to oxygen. It's to protect it. And then the Rhizobium goes on to bring nitrogen down from N2 to N1 to do what? To do photosynthesis. Well, without this little bacteria, we would not be able to breathe. I just really blew my mind. And then I read more about trees and about the fungi underneath the trees that connects everything, and how a disease can enter the forest from the front, and then by the end, the trees on the other side already know about it because of the deep connection and the relationship the trees had with each other. Then I had a birthday, and our son invited us to Austin, where he said he found this fantastic bookstore, and he said that I could choose any books I wanted and he would buy them for my birthday. Well, boy, I could not resist that, so we went to Austin. Wonderful bookstore. It had a coffee place downstairs, and so he and my wife went downstairs to have coffee while I went into the bookstore. Actually, I only found 2 books. One of them was going to change my life, and that book was called The Secret Life of Plants. So I went downstairs and took those 2 books, and then he said, there's another book up there that a colleague of mine has written. I want to get it. Would you go get it? I said I did. So we went to pay for the coffee and for the 3 books, and he accidentally had left his billfold at home. So happy birthday. I paid for my own birthday present, so it was fun. But it was worth it, because this book really has changed my life. There was a man named Baxter that was an expert in lie detection. That was his profession. And he had heard that plants have feelings. And so he decided to experiment about it. So what he did was he put leads on a very big leafed plant, And when he did that, he poured hot water on the plant. Well, nothing. So he said, So as he's standing there beside the plant, he starts thinking, and he says, what would happen if I lit a match under the plant? Automatically, there was a great deal of response from that plant, just going crazy and growing wild. And so he deduced that plants understand intention, and later decided that intention has its own kind of atmosphere or form or substance, that it's real, and that even plants can do that. And so he decided to do another experiment to see if plants had memory. And this was very clever. He had 6 students who were helping him, and he put 6 papers in a hat, and on one sheet it said, your job, without telling anyone, is to go into the lab. There will be 2 plants. You are to pick one of those plants, destroy it, stomp on it, and throw it in the trash can. And so he had put his leads already on the plants, of course. Well, he could tell that the plants had responded with lots of activity and terror, probably. And then he had each of the students walk by. There was only reaction to one of the students, and that student was the one who did the deed. Now, when I read that, I was just so amazed that plants were that alive. And so I read on in the book and came to 2 different things that also fascinated me, and that was 2 horticulturists, one by the name of Luther Burbank. And Luther Burbank had a deep relationship with plants. He listened to plants, and he was able to do so many things that other people could not do with the plants. He was even able to breed a spineless cactus. And he said the way he did it was he convinced the cactus that it did not need the thorns to protect it, because he would protect it. And he had such a wonderful relationship with plants. And then there was another person by the name of George Washington Carver. And he was from Alabama, and he, from a very young age, had a deep relationship in the woods with plants and with flowers. And he would go, when he was young, he would be in contact with the farmers' wives where he lived, and they would tell him about the illnesses that were in their family. And he would go into the woods, and then he would come out with flowers and plants and make concoctions with them, and they would be healed from whatever they came. And he, of course, he was in great demand for that. And then he found the peanut. And from the peanut, he made over 100 different things that even the U.S. Congress was interested in, because it were things that could not be produced as much as we needed for the war effort. And he said, again, that he learned to listen to plants, that he loved them, and that he would listen to what they have to say. And someone asked him, said, are you the only person in the world that can do that? His answer was, he said, no, we can all do it. You just have to believe you can. Well, I was so convinced, I decided to give it a try. So I went to my garden that next day after I finished that section. The last chapter in the book was most fascinating. It was about a place I'd never heard of called Finehorn in Scotland. And there was a man who decided to move there with his wife and 3 children. His last name was Caddy, and her name was Eileen, and she was a gifted clairvoyant. They went there and, at her insistence, and it was the worst place in the world to start a farm, because the soil, there wasn't even soil, it was mostly sand and gravel. But he trusted his wife, and they started. But they started with a different mentality than most of us do. She convinced him that they had to, with all their heart, put love into everything they did, from the first shovelful of the soil to everything they did, and to put love and care into that. And they developed a community that relied a lot on prayer. Now, they did a lot of work to make the soil better, that's for sure. But they depended on an intense love and attention and meditation toward the plants and the flowers that they grew. Finally, toward the end of many years later, they had 36 varieties of vegetables. They had 20 different kinds of fruits, and they had 40 plants for medicinal and for culinary purposes. And it became a Garden of Eden. People from all over the world came and saw it, and they couldn't figure how they did it. Mr. Caddy was really reticent to really tell them why about the spiritual part. He was just said, it's the soil. Well, the soil was not good when he got there, but the soil became good. And I'm convinced it's because they poured love and they poured care into everything they did, everything they planted, everything they harvested. And it became the Garden of Eden in that part of the world. Well, after that, I'm inspired. So I'm ready to try it myself. So I go to my garden, I look out there, and what I see are all my usual things: the okra, the tomatoes, the eggplants, and the pepper plants. Well, the pepper plants are paisley green. They look terrible. So I go over to them and I start putting love toward them. I start touching them, and every day I would do it. And 2 weeks later, they were a dark, healthy green. So I'm congratulating myself. Okay, it does work. So the next morning, I got out and I stood in front of the garden, and I was starting to try and put love toward every plant there, not just the pepper plants. And I felt something behind me that was compelling me to turn around. And so I turned around. I could not believe what I was seeing. Everything was glowing. The leaves on the tree, the blades of the grass, the hackberry tree, the bodark tree, the mint bush, even the Augustine grass were all glowing brightly. And a message came through to me which said, it's not just the garden, it's all of us. We're all alive. I cannot tell you what that experience was like. It was like living in another world. It was at one time the most humbling thing I've ever seen, to realize that I'd been in my late 70 years before I realized that everything truly is one, that everything truly is alive. I'd been, in my philosophical ways, thinking about the earth is one, and the universe is one, and we're all one. Well, it went from theory to fact in front of my very eyes. I was just so thrilled. I was in joy. And then I went into the house, and I began to wonder. One thing I wondered was, why is it the garden wasn't glowing? And I really thought through that, and for me the answer was, it was the strategy of the universe. If I'd seen the garden, just the garden glow, I would just think it was because of what I was doing with the love. But the universe wanted to teach me it's about all of us. And again, it was the most wonderful experience I've ever had. And this is the one thing that I wanted to really share, that the universe is alive. Everything's alive, then you and I are part of it. And you can be at peace with your life before your consciousness goes and after your consciousness goes. That we're still one. We cannot be separated from that oneness. Well, then I was in the garden again the next day, and I was standing beside the eldest peach tree, which had recently lost a very large limb. It was past age. You know, they say they last about 8 years, the production does, and this was about a 12-year-old tree. And so I stood there thinking, I wonder if this tree, to respect the tree, if the tree would like to be cut down, or if the tree would like to just live its life out. And I felt first alarm, and then I felt words coming into my head. I don't know whether I was thinking them. I don't think plants talk, but I think they do give you messages. And the message I heard was, same as you. You know, I'm an old guy. And I thought, I don't want to be cut down, you know, early when I'm not as productive. You know, I want to live a full life. And so then and there I made a bargain with that tree. But what I received from it was a peacefulness and a steadiness that has stayed with me ever since. And so help me that whenever I am disturbed, when I'm anxious, I go out and I stand with that tree. And we stand together. And then I remembered that several years before I had written a poem called The Grouch on the Couch. And in that poem, the hero really is not the grouch. It's the tree that he talks to and that talks to him, that transforms him. Now that I look back, I think it was prescient, that it somehow was related to my future. And I could not let that go by, so I decided to put it into a children's book. And I invited my grandson in to do the artwork because he was an artist. He was 17 at the time, and he agreed to do that. And so we went through the whole process, and we've published the book, and now we have a children's book for people to read. And then there's one more thing I want to deal with, and that is, what is this that has called me to make this talk? Is it the universe? In all my living, in all the incidents and events I've had in my life, I have always felt that there was a spirit, a presence behind everything. There was a presence behind what I learned from Earth on the Edge that called me out of myself to do something. And now I think it's not a background presence. In a sense, it's in the background, but it's also everywhere at the same time. The Native Americans would call it the spirit that is in all things. Or you might call it God, or I might call it the universe. But whatever it is, there is a spirit within all things that we are called by. This is a story I wanted to tell, that the universe is full, is alive, and can bring you peace and joy. Relate to it. Thank you.